Hey everybody, it's Grandmaster Ben Finegold here with Great Players of the Past lecture on International Master Michael Basman. Want to thank our sponsor, Chris Hankinson, for making this lecture possible. Michael Basman was a very unusual player in person. He was a British international master. He was close to Grandmaster strength, but never got the title. He died in October of this year, just less than 2 months ago, at the age of 76. And he played chess in the UK in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. And the last 10 to 20 years, he didn't play very much. And he's also a prolific book author. You can see from his Wikipedia page here, he's written several books on chess. He's beaten many grandmasters, and we're going to actually look at positions from a couple of those games today. And he even played board one for Great Britain in the 70s, and he tied for first in the British Championship 1973. And Michael Basman is known around the world in chess, which is unusual for an IM, because he played such unusual chess. He played very unusual openings. Sorry, I'm feeling a little under the weather today, and I don't even know what's wrong with me. I have a serious case of old. Now, he liked to play very unusual openings, which we're going to see in the lecture today. And I wanted to look at his obituary. I think I'm sharing that too. There's a very good obit that was written last month on chess.com. It has pictures, games, discusses his life a little. It has recent pictures like the one you see here. And it has older pictures from when he was younger, like this one from 1978 when he played Joel Benjamin in Lloyds Bank. And Joel Benjamin's about 4 or 5 years older than I am. So in 78, I would have turned 9. So Joel Benjamin's probably like 14 there. But he was a very good junior player. There's Michael Basman on the right. There he is recently. And there he is, I guess, before a game starts. This is in 2018. And some other pictures. I think this is him watching. This is him also. And there's some comments, chats, and stuff. Anyway, it's a very good obituary because it has a lot of pictures, a lot of games. It talks about his life, and it's on chess.com. So you could just go to a browser and type in Michael Basman, chess.com, obit or something. I mean, I found it pretty easily. And again, sort of reminds me of a player from the 19th century because he wasn't known for playing the most solid current opening theory. He played his own openings. And a lot of times, if I look at games from the best players of the 19th century, we try not to focus on opening theory because that's a little unfair. I mean, they played chess 150 years ago. They didn't have the opening theory that we have now. So it looked maybe a little strange. Basman didn't care what the opening theory was. He wanted to play his own way. And I think a lot of people are afraid to be creative in chess, especially with a lot of the coaching I see nowadays, where coaches would prefer that you played correct chess. They want you to play good chess. And that may be less fun than, playing your own way. And Michael Basman wanted to play good chess, but wanted to play his own way. So he mixed it. And you'll see from the games, some of the openings may shock you. You'll be like, this guy was an IM. And you can do just about anything you want in the opening, as long as you understand what you're doing, even if the engine says it's not correct. Unless, of course, you're playing an engine. Then probably you're in trouble anyway. Okay, let me get to the games. I guess I should share that with you guys. Okay. You guys can see a chessboard now? Yeah, okay, great. Okay, and we'll flip the board because he was black. So now, first two games I want to show you, he's playing in Britain against people I've never heard of. So they might be 2,400, they might be 2,200, they might be 2,000, I don't know. And he takes care of them. And I don't want you to think that, you know, he's only beating people you've never heard of. So the last two games are different. However, even with the few number of games we're going to look at, because we're constrained on time, you're going to see how he played the opening. And he's even written books on these openings. And it doesn't mean that you should play them or that they're good. It means that he did what he wanted to do. He didn't do what chess coaches and opening books told him to do. He did what he enjoyed doing, and with success. Okay, so first game, he's black. And I want to warn you, you're going to be surprised right away. He's not going to play an offbeat Sicilian. He plays offbeat on move 1, and move 2, and move 3, and move 4. And typically, no matter how much you've played chess, once you get to move 5 or 6, you've never seen these positions before, and you never will again. Okay, so he played h6, and he would also play g5. And he liked playing g5 with black, and he liked playing g4 with white. Not common openings at the higher levels, but that didn't bother him. Okay, b3 was played. This is a very unusual move. I think the player with white was thinking, if my opponent plays g5, which he likes to do, I'll play bishop b2, attacking the rook and preventing black from fianchettoing his bishop. Okay, so I've never seen this position ever. And then Basman made another strange move. He played the e6. Well, not yet. e6 is okay. Bishop b2, and he played b6. So Basman liked to play what we currently call hippopotamus formations, where you're putting a lot of your pawns on the third rank. Then you're sort of waiting for your opponent to overextend. And more importantly, you're getting positions they don't know that you like. And to me, this is something that's not explained or taught well at the scholastic level. At the scholastic level, a lot of kids are taught to play classical chess and play solid and play theory and play what's well known and get good positions, but they're not taught to be creative and do some unusual things that maybe they like to do. And obviously it has the advantage of you playing kind of chess you want to play, but it has the other advantage, excuse me, of taking your opponents out of their preparation and out of their comfort zone. And so by playing unusual, strange, weird chess a lot, Basman would get the same kinds of positions that were offbeat, and his opponents didn't really have a lot of experience. And having said that, Basman was known to do that, and yet, how are you supposed to prepare for that when it's like the only game you're ever going to play like that? And that's why I think being creative and doing what you want is just as important as, you know, playing 20 moves of theory in a Sicilian that you both know. Could like that too. Okay, so g3, everybody's fianchettoing. Bishop b7, bishop g2. And the game actually looks pretty normal, except I'm not sure what h6 is, but okay. Pawn on e4 is attacked, d3, d5. And this is looking more normal, although I wouldn't know what to call it, but it's looking like a normal chess position, just not a theoretical one. Okay, e5. I don't like the move d4. I think this gives black a target. I think white should avoid playing d4 and probably play f4, knight f3. Okay, so black plays c5 and knight c6 and targets the center. Knight e2. And he plays bishop a6. And again, Basman liked to play his own way. Typically, you would expect somebody to develop their bishop and castle, but he thought the bishop was better on a6, which I agree with. Bishop's good on a6. Castles, takes, you have to take with the pawn because the knight's pinned. And then h5. So it's funny, already in the late opening, Basman has moved the same piece twice. He's played bishop b7, bishop a6, and he's played h6, h5. Because in chess, as you play, the position changes, and maybe the demands of the position are changing, so you want to play what meets the demands of the position, and he decided he wanted to play for an attack and play the move h4. Although white could play h4 here, but he played f4 and then h4. So again, we have a very unusual position. I don't know who's better. I'm confused. And that was the point of Basman's play, was unusual positions, opponents confused, and he's not playing solid with black and trying to equalize and having a slightly better equal position. He's playing for mayhem. He's playing for positions that are hard to understand and therefore hard to play, and they're sort of fun. Okay, g4, trying to get, white wants to get on his own attack, f5, h3, bishop moves to f3, queen h4. What's funny is, about 6-7 months ago, I was playing in a tournament in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I had something like this for black, but it didn't work out very well. I ended up drawing, but probably should have lost. Okay, so a3 was played. That stops black's playing knight b4, knight d3, and probably prepares to play b4 himself. g5, you're going to see g5 and g4 a lot if you analyze Basman's games. f5. And this is the kind of game where a grandmaster would say, this is more fun to watch than to actually play. So if you're a spectator, this is very interesting. But if you're playing the game, you don't feel like you're in control of the game. You feel like anything could happen, and you're confused. You feel like at any moment, either side could just lose immediately. Okay, he takes on f5. He takes on d5. So again, position's sort of nonsensical. Rook c8, bishop takes f7 check. And that's probably a move that I wouldn't have considered if I had the black pieces. Rook takes f5 check. King goes back to e8. Knight to g3. So black's position looks sort of funny. Queen on h4 is sort of trapped. White has two connected past center pawns. Black's moved his king twice. He can't castle. But black's up a piece. But again, it's a very strange position. Knight e7, attacking the rook. Knight e7 does something that I like to do. It unblocks pieces that were not as active because the knight was on c6. With the knight on c6, our rook can't go down the c line, and our bishop can't go back to b7 and put pressure this way. So I like the knight e7 unblocks both of those for black. And also, The rook may or may not be attacked, depending on your point of view. And I think black wants to play knight d5 as well. So knight e7 is just a good move. Knight d2, white decided that rook wasn't attacked because he wants to always sack the exchange. And then queen takes knight on g3 check. And this is very typical Basman, making a very unusual move in positions that are very unusual. And obviously you have to take the queen, h2 check, and that was the reason he played knight e7, is the bishop can come back to b7 with check. Very strange position. He played king h1 because he can block the diagonal with his knight. Knight takes f5. Now, white played pawn takes. If he doesn't play pawn takes, black's actually ahead material. Black has a rook and 2 pieces for a queen. Plus he has the passed pawn on h2. Plus he's threatening knight takes g3 check. Plus he's threatening bishop b7 check. You have to take the knight. Bishop b7 check. d5. Now d5 is a very interesting move. The reason he played it was if he plays knight f3, the bishop has an open diagonal. I could just play bishop to d5 and threaten to play g4, or I could play g4 right away and win the knight. And what d5 does is it says if you take that pawn and I play knight f3, then my queen's attacking your bishop. That's a pretty interesting idea. So he played rook c5 because he actually wants to take with the rook. And these are, again, as I said about 15 minutes ago, Basman's games remind me of the 19th century, not games that are played nowadays. And that's exciting if you're watching a lecture, you're spectating live. If you're playing the game, it's, you know, your heart starts beating fast because it's so confusing. And it basically just looks like a lot of blitz games that I play, with the exception that this is going to be more accurate because this is a slow game. So calculation will be better. e6, he ignores that, plays rook takes d5. Now he's threatening rook anywhere winning. Rook takes knight is virtually checkmate. So he plays queen f3. He says, if you move your rook, I'm going to play queen takes bishop. And that's probably why he didn't take the knight. If he takes the knight with check, which most of us would do, then rook takes d7 check. And I don't know what to suggest now. I mean, you have to play queen f3. Probably you could also play king d8 here, threatening rook takes d2, which would lead to checkmate. Very complicated, weird position. But he ended up playing queen f3. Knight c5, not only saving his knight, but defending his bishop. So now he's threatening rook takes knight again. And here, white's out of ideas. White doesn't have anything now. So he just took the rook, and he ended up being a piece down in the endgame. After all of that, black is up a piece. And now we're threatening knight takes g3 checkmate. And they trade, and here white resigned. White has to take and then take. And white's just out a piece for nothing. So if we use an engine, we can conclude that some of the play wasn't sound. But that's no fun. We could do that with 19th century games also. But it's more interesting to not use an engine and just see how creative you can be and still play pretty well. Like games that were played 150 years ago. And in fact, the difference is Basman's openings are a lot different than anybody has played, even people who played in the 1900s. Okay, next game he's also black, also in Britain against Simon Bibby. I don't know who that is. And he played h6 again. d4 is more logical. And then a6. So if you're teaching chess in a school and you watch the kids play, you'll probably see this position. and you'll wonder why black wasn't listening to you. But in this case, Basman didn't listen to anybody. He played his own way. And he had his own names for his openings, which, Okay, f4, c5. I would play d5, play knight f3, also good. g5. So it's very hard to predict his moves. Often, Basman would sacrifice a pawn in the opening for open play. And it's hard to believe that you could look at dozens of games by a player and see a different position after move 5 and 6 every game. People usually have an opening repertoire, they stick with it, and they know it, and so forth. And Basman liked to play, strange. Sack material, play on the side of the board, not develop his pieces necessarily, and put his opponent under total confusion. Again, if I was teaching a kids class, I would just think that black just doesn't know how to play. Black probably doesn't know how to move the pieces, just moving pawns. Doesn't even see they can get captured. And I've said this often, that if you look at a game, sometimes you can't tell if it's the worst player in the world or the best player in the world. It's not somebody in the middle. Black isn't going to be 1,500 here. Black's going to be either 100 or some IM or GM who's playing offbeat. Okay, white took the pawn. White's like, give me the pawn. Bishop g7. Bishop's not on c1 anymore, so we have pressure on this diagonal. Takes. Knight c6. And white's a pawn up, and I prefer white. I'm not really sure where I should put my king if I have white. I could see king side, queen side, and center all being dangerous. So Basman's play may not be computer recommended, but it puts the opponent under a lot of pressure. And putting your opponent under pressure and having them make a lot of difficult decisions is a way you can win a lot of chess games and have a lot of fun. Knight c6, not really a fan of that move. Bishop c4, queen b6, threatening the b2 pawn, stopping white from castling. Bishop b3, and rook takes h2. So queen b6 had two ideas, but this one seems sort of crushing. So bishop b3 seems safe, and now we have this move we don't usually see in an opening or middle game, because we have queen g1 check, if he takes it. There's lots of arrows going on here. It's a Hikaru lecture. Okay, so he does take, check, queen takes. Again, I don't understand this position very much because I've never seen anything like it. Pawn structure is very weird, material's equal, white's king is on d2, black's hasn't developed almost all of his pieces. It's just a very strange position. Queen f3, defending his pawn on g2. Queen d6 check. I don't like king e2, but I don't really like anything. Maybe queen d3 is the safest, but he played king e2, queen g6 attacking the bishop, and then a5, ostensively to play bishop a6 check. Again, a6 is going to be a good square for his bishop. Bishop takes c3, ruining the pawn structure, a4, and then d5. And earlier when I said I didn't like king e2, I didn't know why, but now I know why. You can see you're lining up all of your major pieces for the bishop on g4. And so this idea, when he played a5, was to play bishop a6 check, but when he saw king e2, rook d1, he realized bishop here was going to be strong, and by taking the knight and playing a4, this is just a brilliant tactic. The bishop's only safe square is c4, and then d5 attacks the bishop and threatens bishop to g4. Okay, now here white got very creative, because if white just tossed bishop g4, He's going to lose his bishop on c4 and be losing. So he played bishop takes d5, and probably a lot of people, without thinking, would just play bishop g4, winning the queen. And I'm not saying bishop g4 is a bad move, although I'm sort of saying it, because if bishop g4, bishop takes c6, the queen is overworked. If the queen takes the bishop, white takes this bishop and doesn't lose his queen. And if we move our king, then white gets a lot of material for the queen. Although I guess he can't take with the pawn because queen a6 check. Probably take with the king. And this material-wise is about even. So this game would go on for a while. I'd probably still take black because I like having queens. But he just took the bishop, and he's still threatening bishop g4. In fact, white has 3 pieces that bishop g4 is going to attack. So I think no matter what white does, bishop g4 is winning more material. Although black's up a piece. and here, white resigned. And these pieces didn't move. So again, if I saw the score sheet of this game at a tournament, I would just think both players are beginners because the moves don't make a lot of sense. And obviously, if you study chess a lot and you're trying to get better, this isn't the sort of stuff you're studying. So it makes it difficult to make good decisions in unknown situations. And because of that, Basman won a lot of games. And you could say his openings are bad, but he didn't care. And obviously, a lot of detractors would say he wins when his opponents are lower rated, that when his opponents are higher rated, they punish his openings. I mean, that's basically everybody. Everybody's beating lower rated players, losing higher rated players. Truth hurts. But here you get to play your own openings and have fun. Now, instead of showing you games where Basman is beating people nobody's heard of, let's look at games where he beat people you have heard of. If you haven't heard of them, that's your fault. Okay, and this is his game against Henrique Mecking. Mecking, between 1965 and 1975, was one of the top 10 players in the world. And in fact, Mecking won 2 interzonals in a row. That's pretty good. They don't have interzonals anymore, but basically, it's a lot of the best players in the world. And they're trying to qualify for the candidates matches. And as you can see, Basman played a very strange opening and got a very strange position. Looks like a Benoni, but it wasn't a Benoni. It was just total weirdness, the opening. Actually played the opening sort of like I do, so it's extra weird. Okay. Now, last move that white played was knight to b5. He wants to play knight takes d6. And looks like black's position's bad for 2 reasons. Black's down a pawn, and black's queen is on h6 and can't really get into the game. Okay, but Basman, even out of the opening, played very creative and unusual chess. And he followed my rule, even though I was probably 3 years old when this game was played. He played rook takes e4, always sacking the exchange. And the idea is, if he does lose this pawn, this rook can get very active. It could go to d4, b4, a4, and it's a pretty good rook. And then this d pawn would be hanging to the 2 knights. So white took the free exchange. Now white's up the exchange for no pawns. And after the move queen e2, threatening the knight, again, he played a very creative move, one that most people wouldn't consider. I mean, if I was black and I was playing a blitz game, the first move I would think of is f5, because it looks like my knight is really good on e4, and it can't be attacked by a pawn. Unfortunately, Mecking not only attacked my knight, but he lined it up with my rook. So if it's white's move, white wants to play knight takes d6 also. unleashing the queen on the rook. So f5, I think, doesn't cut it. Anyway, Basman played the super creative knight c4. I got 2 knights, 1 for each of you. And if you take either knight, knight d2 check wins your queen. So the knights protect each other somehow. And black wants to play knight to d2 check and start attacking. Now, it's funny, when Mecking played knight b5, he was trying to attack this pawn. Now that pawn's defended 3 times. So knight b5 seems sort of silly now. Okay, he played king a1, getting out of knight d2 check. That seems wrong. Knight to d2, attacking the rook. He played knight a3, trying to get rid of all of the pressure. So you can see if I take this knight, then this would be a funny ending. Queen takes rook, checkmate. Now, Mecking wouldn't do that. Mecking would play queen takes d2. And then it looks like black's run out of gas here. I think white's just winning. If he plays knight takes rook, then his knight looks like it's trapped after I take the knight on c4. So he played rook takes a3, always sack the exchange. Amazing. So he sacks the exchange on e4, sacks the exchange on a3, and he plays h4 and doesn't take it, because if I take the rook, black can get a big attack in more ways than one. One way is to play queen h3, threatening queen c3 checkmate. The other is to play queen h4, threatening queen f6, queen f6 with checkmate. Obviously the queen can block on e5, so white can give his queen away. But you can see that black's knights are better than white's rooks, and that black's king is a lot safer. So he played h4, basically trapping the black queen. Mecking said, yeah, you sack the exchange, but I'm going to trap your queen. The black queen can't get out. Unfortunately, black's ahead material now. So he stopped himself from getting mated, but now knight b3 check, that's pretty exciting. Knight d2 check, and knight d4 check, forking the king and queen. Knight takes queen, and after knight g3, black's going to be up a queen for a rook. And against a player who was top 10 in the world, Basman played a lot more creative, very interesting, confused his opponent, and took all of his pieces. And unfortunately, with the older players nowadays, we don't see a lot of that. We see a lot of draws. We see a lot of 25 moves of theory. We see a lot of Berlins, a lot of Petrovs, but we didn't see that with Basman. Basman played wild and crazy chess, and his wins were fantastic. Okay, now some of you haven't heard of Mecking, because basically after 1977, he sort of disappeared. Some say he was sick, and some say he was mentally sick. The answer is both. Then he made sort of a comeback in the late 80s, but not as one of the top players in the world. Okay, he's from Brazil, by the way. Okay, and last but not least, here's a guy you should have heard of, Ulf Andersson. And not only should you have heard of him, I did a lecture on him in the last month, Great Players of the Past. And he still plays chess, but he's in his early 70s. So he doesn't play as well as he used to. He doesn't play in Super GM tournaments because the truth hurts, basically. Now, a lot of people you may know may play wild and crazy when they're paired down or they're playing blitz, but then they become a normal person when they're playing slow chess and they're paired up. You might call those people me, okay? But Basman wasn't like that. Basman didn't care who he was playing. He played the way he plays, and you can tell that Basman has black here. All his pawns on the third rank, and all his pieces on the second rank. Very weird position. And I would assume that white just has a big advantage here because black is so passive. But I guess I would assume wrong. Yeah. Okay, and the game changed dramatically pretty soon. And I would say this game was played in the late 70s in Hastings. I mean, I would say Ulf Andersson was around his peak here. And Ulf was top 10 in the world. Okay, he played rook e8, did Basman, getting his rook to an active square. King h3, unpinning his bishop. And then there were a lot of trades. Bishop f4, rook e2, queen e7 threatening the bishop, b5. And b5 looks just terrible because the bishop on b7 is so bad. It's just a terrible bishop. Okay, but he plays bishop c8, and he has an idea. His idea is eventually to play h5 and open up the diagonal for his bishop and weaken the white king. And it's hard for Ulf Andersson to play against such a player who's playing so strange. All the pieces on the second rank or first rank, putting all of his pawns on the same color of his bishop, making his bishop look sort of silly. His rook looks sort of silly, and he gave me the c5 square in the c-file. So this looks like black just isn't good at chess, and he's giving white everything, but black has a plan. And it's hard for white to break through anywhere, and white's king eventually is going to be open because he pushed all of his pawns on the king side. So he played queen to d3, defending his f-pawn. h5 did happen. And this was funny, he took it. And what's funny about Basman is he played very strange and had very strange pawn structures, but often his opponent would have strange pawn structures too, because they just weren't used to his style of play. It seems to me a more logical move would be g5. If I was playing a blitz game, I'd probably play g5. It doesn't really help the strength of this f-pawn, at least after taking on h5. White's a pawn up. White has the open file for his rook. And white can defend his f-pawn with bishop g4, which he can't do if you leave the pawn on h5. So maybe Ulf Andersson knew what he was doing. I don't know. Queen f6. Now we have a big threat. Knight takes knight and bishop takes f5 check, winning immediately. King g3. Takes. And now black's position looks pretty reasonable. It doesn't look like it did 10 moves ago. It's like he escaped. Queen c3, threatening the pawn. Bishop d7. And he gets his rook back into the game. Rook e8. And yeah, I mean, white has just all these weak pawns. Black has one weak pawn. He defended it with the bishop. It can't be attacked by the white bishop. So black has nothing to fear. And he plays c5 because he's Basman. Now, if I was black, I would say, yay, I'm really solid on the queen side. Maybe I'll play something like queen f5, queen h3 check. Try to infiltrate on the king side, attack those weak pawns. But Basman plays c5, and he says, I dare you to take my pawn. Now, you have to take it. You can't let black play c4 or take on d4. Takes with the queen. If he takes with the pawn, then we can play d4, attacking the queen, and then rook to e3, and then this king doesn't look very good. So he figured, I'll just take it with the queen, what's the problem? Queen f5. Now the white queen isn't on c3, so white has to watch out for rook c8 and rook e3 and queen h3 check. Queen on c5 isn't really well equipped to defend any of those. Queen takes d5, queen h3 check. Queen h2 check, queen takes f4 check, and white's position's falling apart. Bishop f3, bishop g4. Here a lot of moves win. Obviously he could take the rook on c1 and give up his bishop on d7, but he figured, why would I give my bishop up? I'll just play bishop g4. Rook c3, queen check. White's king is totally naked and terrible. Bishop g2. Queen takes h4 check. King G1, Rook E1 check. It's an amazing turnaround from just 15 moves ago when black's pieces were all trapped on the second rank. Somehow Basman, who did this a lot, he'd play very passive and solid, and then he would spring out. His pieces would spring to action because his plan all along was to lull his opponent into a false sense of security and overextend. And you can see that white did overextend on the king side. White's king side just fell apart. Obviously, if your opponent's playing really passive, it seems logical to just go forward and win. But sometimes you overextend, you're not ready to do that yet, and somebody like Ulf Andersson isn't going to be easily tricked into overextending because he's a very solid player himself, but such passive play and unusual play confuses everybody. Always play bishop f1, bishop h3, Shirov style. Yeah, now I don't really know what to suggest. If you play rook takes h3, I can take with the queen because your bishop's pinned. And so after bishop h3, he resigned. If you play rook g3 I can beat. If you play rook f3, which seems like the only reasonable move to me, bishop f1, I was going to do something that I didn't see queen g2. I thought I was just mating. I guess queen at g4 check just wins a piece. I wonder if there's better. If you play king f2, I win everything. So you have to play king h2, and then I can take. This is a funny variation. Check here, and if you take my rook, I have mate. But here I could play queen g6 check, and then play rook takes at h3, which is also probably winning for black, but this isn't why you would resign. I need somebody to help me find rook f3's refutation, because he resigned instead of playing on, which seemed very reasonable to me. You know, I think bishop f1 is the winning move, and then queen g4 check, and you have to play queen g2 because you can't lose your rook for nothing, and then queen takes d4 check. You can't play queen f2 because this is a very, 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 very easy winning king and pawn endgame. So you can't do that. And otherwise, you're going to lose all your pawns. Like if you play king h2, I take this with check, and then I take this. Man, the truth hurts. I'm assuming there's more than one way to win, so this seems like a good time to resign. All of black's pieces are on white's king, and white doesn't have any compensation, doesn't have any material advantage, just even material, and he's going to lose all of his pawns. So that was a pretty good microcosm of Michael Basman's openings and the way he plays chess, which is not considered sound, but you have to prove it. Telling somebody those moves aren't good and showing them why they're not good is different. And so I'm guessing when he did lose, some of his losses probably didn't look very good, but he beat a lot of good players. He got people out of their preparation. He played a different style of chess. And unfortunately, he passed away a couple of months ago. So because of our great sponsor, Chris Hankinson, we get to do a lecture on Michael Basman. Unfortunately, I never met him, but his games were always interesting to look at, whether he won or lost. And the fact that he tied for first in the British Championship and in a team event in the 70s, he played board one for Britain, shows what a good player he was. And obviously, he was very innovative and very creative. Maybe one of the most creative players of all time to have such high standing in chess. Some creative players are rated 1100, 1200 because they're too creative, if you know what I mean. But he somehow was one of the best players in the country for 20 years, playing a very unusual style. Well, I hope you enjoyed that lecture on Michael Basman, great player of the past. Unfortunately, never made Grandmaster, but beat many grandmasters along the way. This is Grandmaster Ben Finegold. Thanks to our sponsor. If you'd like to sponsor a lecture, contact Karen at atlchessclub.com, and enjoy more lectures with us throughout the years. Bye, everybody.